Good afternoon, everyone. This is Paz Artaza Regan with Catholic Climate Covenant. We'll give this another minute, no more than that, to have others join us. Okay, welcome everyone. As I said, it's Paz Artaza Regan, Program Manager at Catholic Climate Covenant, and I'm happy to welcome you to this webinar, Living Simply, Living Faithfully. In this webinar, we're going to examine how Catholics are called to assess our lifestyles, how we can live more faithfully in a consumer-driven society, how do we can consider our faith in this context, and especially during this season that we're starting with Advent and Christmas, how it's doubly important to think how we celebrate in a more humble and generous manner, how our spiritual life can become more abundant when we examine our responsibility in consuming things and giving things. At this point, let me move on to, as always, we get started with a moment of centeredness and prayer. So I would ask us to remember to quiet our hearts and open them up, and to remember that we're always in the presence of God. This is a prayer called Wake Us Up, Lord. God of salvation, wake us up, Lord. The night is nearly over. Let us begin our Advent journey. Move us from our lives of greed and selfishness, from our globalized world of inequality and exploitation, to our kingdom of righteousness and mercy, to a transformed world where peace is built on understanding, not weapons. The poor are empowered to live their lives to the full. Businesses are built on need, not greed, and your creation is nurtured, not abused. Wake us up, Lord. Let us live as people of the light. Amen. And let us take a minute to look at what we call the housekeeping issues. First of all, yes, this webinar is being recorded. It'll be a link of it will be sent to everybody who registered within the next couple of days. If you look here, you have your control panel. You can choose the audio that you're using. You can either use your computer audio or a phone audio, and it gives you the instructions of where to call if you need to connect via phone. We ask that you submit your questions in the questions panel on the side there of your control panel. The Q&A session will happen after all the presentations. I always tell folks that if you have some audio issues, it's most likely due to if you're using Wi-Fi. You can connect to the phone for better audio in that case. Let us then get started with some introductions. We've got two wonderful presenters today. The first presenter will be Kyle Kramer, and then followed up with Simone Blanchard. Let me introduce Simone and Kyle, and then Kyle will start. Kyle is the executive director of the nonprofit Passionist Earth and Spirit Center, which offers interfaith educational programming in meditation, ecology, and compassion. He's the former director of graduate theology programs and spiritual formation for I'm going to say this wrong, but Saint Meinrad, a Benedictine monastery and Roman Catholic School of Theology. Kyle and his family have spent 15 years as organic farmers and homesteaders in Spencer County, Indiana. He serves as Catholic Climate Covenant's ambassador program, and he's a former columnist and essayist for America Magazine, a current columnist for Franciscan media St. Anthony Messenger, and the author of A Time to Plant, Life Lessons in Work, Prayer, and Dirt. And Kyle will be giving the theological background for this topic. After that, Simone Blanchard will be speaking. She's the manager for Catholic Relief Services Ethical Trade Program. She's worked for CRS since 2006 in a variety of roles, including the relationship manager for the Southeast Regional Office, manager for the Haiti Partnership and Partnership Unit, and Partnership and Capacity Specialist. Before joining CRS, she was the director of parish social ministry for the Archdiocese of Atlanta. Her passion is working and engaging with Catholics in the global social mission of the Church through education, advocacy, prayer, and action. Simone has a master's in international affairs and development from Clark Atlanta University, and she lives in Maryland with her husband and daughter and attends St. Michael's Catholic Parish. So welcome and thank you to both our panelists. And at this point, I will pass it on to Kyle.
Hi, Paz. Can you hear me all right?
We hear you great. Thanks, Kyle.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for the first slide. That is a picture of my daughter, our daughter, Claire, running through one of the hayfields on the organic farm where we used to live. And I open with this picture because it's a reminder to me that I want to live in a world where such simple and playful pleasures and such wild abandonment are still possible. I want this to be possible for all children, not just to middle-class white children. I want it to be possible for us grown-up children too, where we're not too busy, not too distracted, too poor or unsafe, not too paralyzed with guilt or fear or shame. I want us to have a world that is still lovely and green and beautiful enough to want to run through and savor it. And I've got some good news. My daughter, Claire, this was taken many years ago. She's 15 now, and her twin sister, Eva. And they are the most amazing kids. They don't have cell phones. They could care less about social media. I think they're the two people under age 15 or 16 who don't. They love nature and books and music and art and writing, and they've long since outgrown their princess dresses, but they still run barefoot outside, and they have this rich imagination and interior life. And most importantly, they are kind and loving and generous, sensitive, compassionate kids, and happy. And so, yes, they're oddballs. They're definitely oddballs, but I think they're the kind of oddballs that the world needs. And they're honestly the kind of people that I'd like to grow up to be. They're not perfect, of course, who is, but they're thriving. So I bring this up not because, like every parent, I like to brag on my kids, and full disclosure, I would have ruined them left to my own devices. It's mainly because of my wife that they are in such good shape. But I bring them up because I want to dispel the notion that simplicity is some moral duty that you just practice with gritted teeth. I'd like to frame simplicity for this webinar as an intentional pathway to happiness, to joy, and to flourishing. Certainly for ourselves and for others, and for the flourishing of God's entire creation. So I guess that's the first point that I'd like to make, at least from the perspective of Catholic social teaching. At its best, the moral teaching of the Church is not just about blindly following a bunch of rules. St. Irenaeus once wrote that the glory of God is a human being fully alive. So my take on church teaching is that it's there to guide us in making choices that help us become fully alive, help us become our truest and best selves, which, when you think about it, is at the same time our most joyful and fulfilled self. And not just for you and your own kin, but for the entire human community and for the other than human community. And the term for this in Catholic social teaching is integral human development. Pope Paul VI introduced that back in the late 60s, and Popes John Paul and Benedict, and certainly now Francis, they've all built upon it. And integral human development is essentially human progress and evolution that encompasses the development of all the necessary components of a good life. So it's basic safety, it's food security, it's decent work and educational opportunities, it's equal rights for women and minorities, a robust social fabric, an effective government, legal system, healthy environment. All of these things are part and parcel of us growing and developing as a human family. And unfortunately, they're not all the ways that we have developed in the West. So in a Catholic context, simplicity means, I think, looking at our lifestyle choices and filtering them through this question of what makes for integral human development and a more flourishing world. And I think that cultivating simplicity in our lives will make it possible that more and more children like Claire and us grown-ups can run safely and well-fed through green fields. Paz, if you can give me the next slide, please. One of the reasons why simplicity makes for more flourishing and a fulfilled life is because simplicity is also at the heart of the Christian spiritual life. Much of Christian spirituality, I think, makes the same mistakes as our consumer culture, thinking that more is better. We just kind of use a different type of more. We think more prayers, more liturgy, more spiritual reading, more almsgiving, more, I don't know, heavenly visions, more steps up the ladder or along the spiritual path or whatever. But I think that one of the key insights we learn from guides like St. Francis, like Julian of Norwich, Meister Eckhart, John of the Cross, other mystics and contemplatives, is that the deepest part of the Christian journey is not what we add. It's what we subtract. On the spiritual journey, less is more. And deep spirituality is about letting go of all the attachments and pretenses of the ego self, or what Thomas Merton called the false self. It's that part of us that we project to the world, and often where we invest our sense of self-worth, even if it's not ultimately real. Deep spirituality is coming to rest in the knowledge that our truest self, that spark of God in us, it's a place beyond all of our striving. It's beyond all of our accumulation of spiritual brownie points and merit badges. It's what the contemplatives call, fancy word here, the apophatic path, the path that emulates the self-emptying or kenosis of Jesus, both in the way that he conducted his ministry and also the way he died willingly on the cross. Jesus did not grasp onto anything, not possessions, not security, not reputation, not even his own life. And so one of the best ways to practice this letting go of attachments, and when we say spiritual practice, that's exactly what we mean is practice, practice, practice. One of the best ways to do it is to cultivate space and stillness and silence in our lives, because that's the kind of contemplative prayer and meditation that will help loosen our grip on everything we have, and even on our own self-image, even on our own ego. And although I've worked with, or maybe because I've worked with vowed religious most of my professional career, I can say that you don't have to be a monk or a nun for this. And I can also say that it's not easy. I've done some kind of contemplative prayer practice for, over 25 years now. And I often think, geez, I should have it figured out by now. But I'm not a natural. I still have a really busy, restless mind. I'm still driven and high energy and type A. And I basically still have pretty much all the faults and foibles that were given to me from my genes and my upbringing. But it has been a huge help to me. And as I often say to my wife, I may still be a jerk sometimes, but I'm less of a jerk than I would be otherwise. And I usually find out or notice more quickly when I'm being a jerk. So it's my strong recommendation for some kind of contemplative practice, and the fruits of that will be really clear, I think, over time. And this spirituality I'm kind of presenting to you here, I think that it's one that naturally leads to a simpler outer life. that naturally leads to less attachment to things. And on the other side of the coin, I think if you start on the outside, if you start by simplifying your outer life of clutter and distraction, it will make it easier to cultivate this inner simplicity as well. So there's really kind of a virtuous circle there. And the point of it at the end of the day is to open up our deepest selves to God, which is the ultimate end of human flourishing. Pause if you can give me the next slide. So in the last 5 minutes or so of my piece of this webinar, I just want to touch on two important aspects of simplicity and how that manifests in the Catholic tradition and in our own lives. The first has to do with our necessary love for and connection to the poor. You know, beneath the slick surface of our iPads and our iPhones and our Mac Airs and our flat screen TVs, our perfect produce, just our mountains of things and our resource intensive lives, beneath all of this is an economic machine that tends to create a really small number of really rich people, a large swath of kind of indebted and exhausted middle class people, and a huge substratum of poor people, many of whom work under really difficult conditions for low wages to supply us a lot of our stuff. Now, Simone's going to talk more about some alternatives to that whole machine in the second section of this webinar. So all I'll say here is very simple, that we are our brothers and sisters' keeper. And part of the Christian calling is to be in solidarity with the poor. We're called to make lifestyle choices that keep us on the side of the poor. And the reason for that is because God has a special love for the poor. It's a very strong theme in Catholic social teaching. It's called the preferential option for the poor. When you think about it, Jesus was poor. He spent most of his time among poor people. He had a special concern for the poor. His life and his teaching revealed a God who had a special love for the poor. And put really simply, and this is hard for a lot of us middle-class folks to do, but if you want to be close to God, there's a very simple formula: be close to the poor. And it was this insight that turned St. Francis's world upside down. It was why he gave up his family's wealth, because it was among the poor that he found it easiest to connect with God. The less simple our lives are, the harder it's going to be in solidarity with the poor. We are too busy and distracted. I don't know if many of you have heard of this famous Princeton seminary experiment back in the early 70s, where these subjects were to preach on the parable of the Good Samaritan, caring for the one in distress. And they kind of impromptu sent these seminarians across campus to a different place where they had to deliver their homilies. And on that route, they had planted someone who was in clear need of help. And a disturbingly large proportion of these seminary students passed right by their opportunity to be a Good Samaritan. And what they realized later was the factor that was strongest in predicting whether someone would stop or help or not was how late they were to give their homily and how much time pressure they were under. If they had a little more breathing space, they were more apt to stop. So our Christian calling in light of that is somehow to craft our lives such that there is enough spaciousness, enough time, and enough freedom from distraction so that we can actually remember that the poor exist and that they have a claim on us. The next slide, pause. The earth has a claim on us too. When we were preparing for this webinar, Simone and Paz and I mentioned that I was going to be drawing a little on Pope Francis's environmental encyclical Laudato Si, and they made me promise that I would not use that unfortunate line from the encyclical that the earth is becoming this immense pile of filth. So I guess I did just break that promise, but I'm really actually trying to make the opposite point. And it is true that our really resource-intensive Western lifestyles are wreaking havoc on God's creation, but the deeper truth is, as Pope Francis points out, is that creation is good and that we human beings, we are created to belong fully within it. It is our home. Like us, creation is made in the image of God. It's it's Trinitarian, which means that every part of creation leans on every other part. It's in relationship with everything else. It means that every part of creation has dignity and worth, and not just us humans. It means that God cares deeply, not just about the human story, but about all of creation. Not a sparrow falls without God's knowledge or care. And so in the face of this kind of creation, we have a calling. We've got a moral calling to care for creation. The book of Genesis teaches us that our human vocation is to till and keep it, to tend it with care and love and skill. But there are more pressing and practical and kind of self-serving reasons to take care of creation other than just ethical duty and what my wife calls a bad case of the shoulds, or when I get preachy, she says I'm shoulding all over her. The first is pretty obvious. Creation is what supports and sustains us, and so if we don't live sustainably, we're going to have a rough go of it. And the latest climate report from last Friday is, I think, pretty ample evidence of that. We've got about 12 years to figure out how we do this new lower carbon lifestyle. And finally, Catholic tradition teaches us that we live in a sacramental world, and every part of it reveals God's glory, as Pope Francis reminds us again in Laudato Si. The natural world is actually the source even of all of our religious symbols. And so if we degrade the natural world, we actually impoverish our own religious imagination. It's not possible to be a Christian without resting in these symbols of the natural world. I mean, think about it. Think about trying to write the Psalter or the book of Isaiah if you had to depend only on metaphors drawn from strip malls or strip mines. It just wouldn't work. But simplifying our lives can help us to see the world's beauty much more clearly and to preserve it for future generations of Claires, of Isabellas, of Muhammads, of Lakshmis. So finally, if we could get the last slide, Pas, I'm going to run very quickly through a couple practical tips as we head into the holiday season. And I know that Simone will pick up this torch in more detail. First of all, try as best you can to draw some good boundaries around your screen time, your email and digital media and so forth. For me, we're all hypocrites about this stuff. So of course, I'm not perfect either, but I try not to look at a screen for about an hour before bedtime. That one's hard, especially since they invented this blue shade thing that makes you feel like it's not going to keep you up. But I try to not look at a screen at least an hour or even 2 hours after I get up in the morning. I get up really early and have some contemplative practice and exercise, but that's been a really good discipline for me. Secondly, is a way to kind of cut through what I call the faux simplicity of today, which is the fact that because I have a credit card or a checkbook, I can pay other people to do pretty much everything that supplies my basic needs. And there's a wonderful embrace of a different kind of complexity, actually, and a kind of simplicity in taking back up some of the things that support your own needs. Now, when I was an organic farmer, we did that in spades. I built my own house and cut all our firewood and, of course, grew our own food and all of this. Not everyone's called to that by any means, but almost all of us can cultivate the satisfactions of a garden or cooking more or doing household repairs or sewing clothing, et cetera. Third, take time for relationships. I had two difficult wake-up calls in the last couple of years. One was my mother's very difficult bout with cancer, which we did not think she'd survive, and she did by many miracles. And so we have her for some indefinite period of time into the future, and that was that along with a lower back injury that kind of put all my doing out of commission for a while. It was a wake-up call for me as to what's really important, especially as my kids get older. So take time to visit family and friends and to maintain relationships. Those are the things you'll remember more so than any gear you might acquire. Fourthly, cultivate boredom. Be bored. This is the trick to our parenting, is not feeling like we needed to entertain our kids all the time and letting them be bored without a lot of electronic stimulation or other stimulation. And as a result, especially on the farm and where we live now, they've been forced to create their own entertainment. And they've developed these amazingly rich imaginations and tremendously creative play and long attention spans. Creativity does not come out of a frenzy. It comes out of the same sort of spaciousness that prayer cultivates, and out of a sense of boredom. I have never had a great inspiration for a writing project, for example, when I'm in the middle of binging on Netflix. It takes time and space and nothing to fill it but that. And finally, mindful consumption. Ask yourself always, what do I need versus what do I want? Consult with a partner or spouse if you're going to spend more on something, not just gas or groceries, but more on a thing for you that's more than a certain amount. In our house, it tends to be about $20 because we've got a pretty strict budget. If you're really ambitious, when you buy one thing, get rid of two. If you just want to kind of maintain a steady state, when you buy one thing, get rid of one. And finally, the things you do get, use those purchases to support the world that you want to see. We tend to buy good food. I love really good tools because I use them. I like well-made clothes that last because I don't care about fashion. And I love durable items. And Simone has a lot of great resources to offer in this realm, so I will hand things over to her.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. In a way, I'm thinking that your whole presentation was the beginning of our moments of contemplative prayer. I kept going into my own being to think about how to integrate your suggestions. Thank you. At this point, we will move to Simone, and Simone will be giving us the practical tools that CRS, Catholic Relief Services, Ethical Trade Program, has for us to follow up on what Kyle was talking about. Simone?
Hi, everybody. It's so great to be here with you today. We're also on Instagram Live on CRS Ethical Trade Instagram channel. So, yeah, really excited to be here today. Thank you so much, Kyle, as well. I think your framing of living simply is really, really important, and especially at this time of year, the holidays. As you all know, I work for Catholic Relief Services. And just in case you don't know, we are the official humanitarian and relief development organization of the U.S. Catholic community. We work in about 100 countries around the world, and we work with and for and on behalf of the most vulnerable people, populations around the world. So it is true what Kyle said about our real need to create space, to remember the poor, to remember that they have a claim on us, to remember that we are really part of this one human family, part of the body of Christ. So I hope to give you a couple of helpful tips to do that during this very busy time of year when there are a lot of opportunities to do the exact opposite of that. So hopefully you will get inspired and share what you learned with your family and friends. We're going to go through a couple things today. The first is a set of questions, very simple questions that I have found helpful, our team has found helpful when we think about purchasing, before we purchase something, some questions to ask ourselves. The second thing we're going to talk about is the importance of prayer, especially during this time of year, which happens we're coming upon Advent. And so many times it's so easy to forget what this season is really about. And so we'll talk a lot about how to center ourselves during this time of year. And then third thing I want to talk about is how to connect with other people that have also made this commitment to people and the planet in their daily lives and their daily decisions. Because sometimes it can feel lonely when everyone seems to be doing the exact opposite of what you're trying to do. And so finding others, like folks that are involved with the Catholic Climate Covenant or folks that are interested in simple living is really, really important to encourage you on your journey. Then we'll talk about some alternative giving options. If you don't want to buy stuff, what you can do instead. And then we will talk about, Kyle mentioned it, but we'll talk about the power of your purchase. You really do have power as a consumer to support companies that do good by people and the environment. And then third, we have a couple of tools that are kind of fun. We have a holiday gift guide. We have another online community shopping program that's kind of fun, that raises awareness about the people behind the product and also raises support for CRS programming overseas. So we'll go ahead and get started with the important questions that you really should be asking yourself. And I will tell you that these have really helped me to create space, because especially at this time of year, we just came upon Cyber Monday and we had Black Friday, and there's all of this pressure to buy, and our children, at least my child, she's pretty good, but there's always something else that she remembers that she wants for Christmas, and there's always that pressure to buy that for her. And if we don't take the time to stop and to ask questions, it's very easy to get sucked into this consumer culture that we live in. So these simple questions: will the product bring joy to my life or someone else's? Especially during the holidays, we do have a culture of giving. So really intentionally think about the person that you're buying for. What is it that they really are interested in? What do they really like? Instead of just, I have to give this person a gift, click Amazon, here it is. So that's one. Also, will my purchase affect positive change? What am I looking to buy? What is the company about? Where was it made? What is the effect on the environment? And even down to the question of who made this product, because most likely the person at the end of that product isn't making very much. And in fact, most of the time they're just getting by, if they're getting by. And so it's really important to think about every single thing that we buy, there's somebody behind that product. And then finally, as Kyle mentioned, how can I keep from overindulging? How do I live more simply? And is this something that I really need to get for my family member or friend or for myself? Or is this something that I really don't need, or I can borrow? And so these questions have helped me and others, I think, to create that space, to stop for a minute and to think. And actually, I know in my own life, it has really helped me to purchase less, actually, and to purchase better. Okay, so next, I'd like to just talk about prayer, and especially as we come upon this season of Advent. And really, it's so important to give ourselves that time and that space to prepare our hearts for the coming of Jesus. And, this is one of the busiest times of the year. And so we can easily be distracted by everything else that's going on. But I think that it is so important, because prayer is another way that we can create space for Jesus, that we can create space to really pray for and think about the people that are behind everything that we consume. And of course, the effect on the planet of everything that we consume. CRS has a couple of good resources that I like. We have some reflections that are connected with the gospel for every Sunday in Advent. This first Sunday coming up is about climate change, and features a coffee family that we work with in a coffee farming community. And it has just a couple questions for reflection with your family. And it's something that you can use, at the dinner table or even at the breakfast table before Mass. I like these. We also have an Advent calendar this year that's digital, where you're connected with someone from around the world every day of Advent. So that is also just some tools to help really connect us during this time of year. And so the next thing I really want to talk about is really creating a community of like-minded people that share your values, that care about reducing their consumption, that care about purchasing in a way that actually supports workers in the environment. We have been really fortunate to work with several different Catholic folks around the country who care about these issues, who care about the people behind their products, and it's we call them community stories, but it's basically the Ethical Trade blog. And so it's a good place to find inspiration, to find other people who have made similar commitments, and you all have the Catholic Climate Covenant and people that also have this interest in preserving our world and protecting our earth. And so I would just encourage you to really use the networks that you can to build up your community. And finally, alternative giving. This word is sort of flipped around a lot of times, and there's different meanings for it. But alternative giving, this is what are some other things that you can do besides actual physical gifts or brand new gifts? And I think this is not rocket science. I think most of you have heard of these ideas. The one that I have featured here is actually the CRS gift guide, which is basically where you can choose a symbolic gift that actually helps a family or a community in need that CRS works with overseas. So like, for example, I think you've seen it before, but like $25 will fund like a health exam for 12 children. $35 will fund a school kit for a child to be able to go to school. Many of you know in many countries, the education sometimes is free, but the actual school supplies and uniform are not free, and you have to have that in order to be able to go to school. So that is limiting for a lot of families that don't have the money. So these are the types of things. It comes with an e-card, so you're not wasting any paper, and it is something that, for the person in your life that has everything or that doesn't want any other things, it's a great way to support a good cause and to also be able to give a gift in honor of that person. So that's one, and many other organizations do this as well. The other thing, and this, I just went to my local thrift store just last week, and what my local thrift store does is they actually save all of the new gifts that they receive every year. So any new items that are still in the packaging that are good for giving at Christmas, they will save all of those. And they have one day during the holiday season where they invite the children to come in and shop for their family members. And everything is between $1 and $5, and they're brand new gifts. And so that, a lot of thrift shops do that, and a lot of thrift shops have brand new gifts. So if you still want to give something and you want to give something that is new, then I would suggest that you check with your local thrift shop. I was just in Goodwill last week, and I think half of the things they had were new and were still in the package. The other thing that you can do, of course, is homemade gifts. People love, especially family members, getting homemade gifts. They're more meaningful. You've spent time on them. A lot of times it's something that your children can do, and it's a way to get your kids involved in gift giving as well, and meaningful gift giving. So those are just, I think, a couple ideas of how you can participate in alternative giving this Christmas season. And actually, the last thing is giving experiences. So like tickets to the movies, tickets to the theater, going to a national park, all of those things, are things you can give instead of an actual gift. Okay, so the power of your purchase. So Catholic Relief Services Ethical Trade Program, we work with about 20 different ethical businesses. We call them our partners. And we actually have vetted all of these businesses to ensure that they're paying workers a fair wage in the local context, that they are taking steps to reduce their carbon footprint, and that they are investing in the communities where they source their products. And so all of these companies that we work with are committed to people and to the planet. In addition, they also are giving CRS a donation for every single referred purchase. So that means for every person that we send their way and they purchase something, we are receiving a donation in full disclosure. And these donations go directly to our programming overseas, specifically to our work with smallholder farmers and small artisan communities. And all of the projects that we're currently funding are right there on our website on our Global Impact page. So it's kind of cool because the companies that we're partnering with are doing good by the environment, they're doing good by people, and they're actually making a donation on your behalf to CRS for our work overseas with vulnerable working communities. So it's pretty exciting. It's kind of a win-win. If you choose to purchase things this holiday season for your friends and family, it's a way to do it with intentionality. Okay, so next. So this is just like a sneak peek at our holiday shopping guide. This is the fashion section, but we do have a holiday gift guide. We will be sending out links to you tomorrow. Paz will be doing that, so you'll get the links that will go to all of these things that I've mentioned. So it will be much easier. I think there's about 12 gifts that are actually under $25 in the gift guide. So there's something for everyone. And the good thing is that anything you buy from any of these companies that we partner with, you will double your impact because they will make a donation on your behalf, not just for these things in the gift guide. So it's kind of fun. Feel free to share this with your friends, with your family, on your website if you have one. So that's our gift guide that gives back. All right. And then the last thing I want to talk about is just a way to get your community involved. And since all of you right now are joining us virtually, this is a virtual way to host a community shopping event, really. Our partner Serve works with artisans all over the world. They have beautiful handcrafted home decor and apparel and jewelry. And they have launched a new program with us called CRS Shop and Serve. So if you sign up for it, you'll get this unique URL that is just unique to you, and you can send it to all of your friends and family, your people that are in your organization, and then every time somebody uses that link to shop, a donation will be made to CRS. Actually, 20% of their purchase will come to CRS, and we will put that back into our programs to help vulnerable working communities overseas. So it's a cool and easy way to kind of get others involved in this and to generate donations for Catholic Relief Services, and also to support a nonprofit called Serve, which works with artisan communities all over the world. So those were the main sort of practical tips that I wanted to share with you. If we'll just go to the last slide. So we are having a Facebook Live on December 3rd, if you'd like to join us. The CRS Ethical Trade Facebook page, where we'll talk more about our holiday gift guide. And as I said, tomorrow you should receive an email with all the different links so that you can look at all the things that Kyle and I talked about, and the information is also on this last slide. That's it for now. I think we're going to open it up for questions.
Great, thank you, Simone. Got a few questions that I'm going to parcel out. And the first set of questions I think are for Kyle, and I'm hoping that I'm able to phrase them correctly. We had one question, in what ways has contemplative prayer helped you? So if you could elaborate on that. And then the second question that attaches to that is, do you have any tips or resources for folks to go to if they want to get more information on contemplative prayer?
Okay. Well, as I mentioned in my own talk, the main way it's helped me is become a little less of a jerk. And I'm really not kidding. I would say, as I mentioned in my talk, I'm a person who is, really pretty tightly wound, and to whom slowing down doesn't come naturally. And at the same time, I'm an introvert who does need a lot of time to myself. I think I'll answer that first question in two different ways. One, very self-servingly, I know that as busy as my life gets, because I've carved out a period of time every morning to sit silently, I know that I always have that oasis to return to. It doesn't matter how badly things are going in my work life or my married or parenting life or how badly I slept, all of the various disasters that befall us, knowing that I have that safe place to be in for in my case, usually about a half an hour, where no one is asking anything of me, where I don't have to deliver anything, where I don't have to accomplish or achieve, where I can just sit and be. That has been a tremendous relief to me in my personal and my professional life. So that's one, is just this sense of refuge that it's provided me. And outwardly, the contemplatives say that never look for the fruit of never judge yourself on your contemplative practice by like how calm you can get your mind or anything like that, by the time that you spend in prayer itself, what's happening then, because you may get the grand heavenly visions, or you may go years or decades like Mother Teresa with just a spiritual flatline. And so the better measure, if you even want to measure, is how things are going in your life otherwise. No, that's not the right way to put it. Are you becoming a kinder, gentler person? Are you a little less inclined this week than last year to yell at the jerk driver next to you, or anything like that? So by the fruits of the prayer, that's how you really know it. And in terms of resources, I think a great one-stop shop is, well, I'll give you two. Richard Rohr and the Center for Action and Contemplation has a great organization and a great daily email that is geared in large part toward contemplative practice. And there's an organization called Contemplative Outreach Limited, started by Thomas Keating and others. And they have a number of resources there, books and links, and in many cases, local prayer groups that can practice and together and support each other.
Great, thanks. This question's for Simone. Are there any online resources that you recommend to look up the ethical practices of a company?
That's a good question. Thanks for your question. There are several out there. On our website, we list several different certification systems and what they mean. So if you're looking at labels, what do those labels mean, and what do they mean for the planet, and what do they mean for people? So we do have that resource on our website that goes through fair trade and B Corps and organic and all of the different specialty certifications that are out there to provide sort of that third-party certification monitoring system for companies. So I think that's probably a good place to start.
Right, and here's a follow-up to Simone, that a lot of these stores that are like CRS Ethical Trade site and other fair trade stores sell a lot of things that are not necessarily under the essential stuff. The things that they're mostly decorative items and gifts that are the little extras. Are there places that we can find ethically made essential things like underwear, socks, t-shirts?
Yes, absolutely. But let me just quickly say something about why that is, especially with fair trade crafts. That all started after World War II to really help displaced artisans to start again. And so that is why so much of it is sort of home decor and artsy things. However, really over the past 10 years, I think, just fair and ethical trade merchandise has just increased exponentially. And so now you can find organic fair trade certified clothing, so shirts and socks, and so there's Hey Now, and there's Packed Organic for sort of those basics, and then there's Maggie's Organics for the socks and basics, and there are certainly a lot of the food items, because the fair trade certified items are just commodities. So the coffee and the chocolate and the nuts and produce is now certified. So there's a lot of things that you can find food items for that are certified fair trade and organic. That's food is certainly essential. You can also now find alcohol, which is not essential, depending on who you talk to, but you can find that now. And so those would be some of the staples. They're also starting, another non-essential but high-end like jewelry, like fair trade gold and silver is now available, and these types of things were not available as much in the past. So there are a lot more options than ever before, really.
Yeah, and I think demand is probably going to make the options even bigger as more people are asking for these things. This question is really a follow-up to the ethically made things, and that is taking the step beyond the final product of finding out if ingredients that we use for homemade treats, if they're ethically made. It's somebody who lives in a small town with just a little grocery, a chain grocery store, so they can't go to organic sort of things. I'm not aware of a list like that. I'm opening it up to Kyle and Simone if you know of anything.
I think, Kyle, you can chime in, but I think in cases like that, I always look at the back of the package and look to see if there are any certification labels on that product. A lot of times in rural communities, you can actually buy local produce and things that have been produced right there, which is a good start. But as far as packaged items, that's where I look for the different labels to see, if this product has gone through any type of external certification.
And tagging onto that, Simone, I also have spent most of my adult life living out in a rural community with limited access to good grocery stores. And to your point, those grocery stores often do carry local produce in some cases, and farmers markets have certainly been able to fill some of that gap as well. We had a food co-op where we were, so you may investigate those options, whether like a buying club or a weekly delivery food co-op is possible. And I say this last one with some ambivalence, but there's always Amazon Prime. Wherever you may live, a drone can deliver various foodstuffs. And again, there's a carbon footprint to that kind of delivery. So I say that with some hesitation, but it is among the range of options, especially in our case, for example. We often buy a lot of stuff in bulk, whether it was through our co-op or through, Bob's Red Mill and other big kind of staple suppliers.
Yeah, thanks. This is not so much a question. It's more of a comment for Simone, and I think it's an interesting one. It is in that section that you had about the questions that we should be asking ourselves as we consume things. One of our attendees suggests that we also need to ask what happens when you finish using the item. So it's the post-consumer kind of side. So I wanted to bring that up. And then here's a question that comes very close to my heart. And I think it's for all of us if we want to answer a little bit of it. How do we deal with the guilt of not being perfect in this whole subject area?
Badly. You want to take a first crack at that, Simone? Or should I?
I can say
Okay,
that.
I'm going to jump in as a person who spent some time on the one of the Enneagram, which is the perfectionist. Um, it is hard to know that whatever choices you make and whatever actions you take are never going to be enough. There's always going to be some harm involved. It's not possible to live in the world and have zero impact. Even as an organic farmer, I remember one time tilling up one of our fields, and it was dry and it was windy, and I looked behind me and on my big Kubota tractor, burning diesel fuel, and this plume of my farm was blowing off away behind me with wind erosion. So there's no such thing as a clean and perfect life. That's kind of a truth you have to keep returning to. And I think the other piece that I would say is no, all of these problems. How to put this? The beautiful thing about living in an interconnected world is that you don't have to be responsible for everything. There are plenty of folks. There is a communion of saints and a great cloud of witnesses that will shoulder these burdens with you. And maybe it is given to you to do one small thing well or partially well, and that is what you can manage. And that, in God's eyes, is enough.
Amen. Simone?
Well said. I mean, I think we all run into these things in our daily lives where where even, the most conscientious of people, something happens. This morning, my daughter said, "Mom, I need you to buy plastic wrap." And I said, "Sophia, I made a decision not to buy any more plastic wrap." And she said, "But I need to make your Christmas present with it." So now trying to figure out what I can give her that is not plastic wrap. So I think, but the important thing is that I'm thinking about these things, and we're thinking about these things, and we're trying, and we're putting an effort, and we're asking for forgiveness and help when we fall short.
Yeah, there's a great quote from Thomas Merton that I'll butcher, but it's something along the lines of, I something about I desire to please you, and I hope that the desire itself pleases you, even if I myself through my actions can't. At least the fact that I want to um, uh, counts for something in the spiritual equation.
Yes, absolutely. I think that we just need to be a little easy on ourselves on this subject and just try our best.
Right, and I think Simone brought something up that was really wonderful in terms of intentionality. That when you're purchasing, you're doing so with mindfulness and intentionality. The intention is everything. We have much less control over the outcome than we do over the intention, and I think that's been a comfort to me. I hope it is to others.
Definitely. Okay, well, I think I've covered most of the questions. People are saying that they're feeling more conscious about things, and they also loved your point about boredom. That
That was in case I was boring you. I wanted to make sure.
well, they seem to have liked it. So yes, at this point, I think we will end the webinar. I would like to thank everyone for attending, the presenters for their incredible material and your engaging delivery. No boredom at all.
Well, thank you all for being part of this, and blessings on for Christmas, Advent and Christmas.
Likewise. And I have here for folks to go, oh, and take out that whole Sacred Places thing. I don't know how that stayed there. Just keep the info at Catholic Climate Covenant for you to go for more info. You will be receiving an email tomorrow with the recording and with links to resources that have either been spoken about today or that the presenters decide to give me to pass on. So at this point, I wish you all a wonderful day. And as everybody said, blessed Advent and Christmas season. Till the next time, probably in January. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, Paz. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.